Here are the 8 secret districts where Monaco's billionaires actually live. And the closer we get to number 1, the crazier it gets. You're about to see a tower where the world's priciest penthouse sits right on top of subsidized housing, a neighborhood where half the F1 grid lives on the same racetrack they compete on. And at number 1, we have an entire district that didn't exist until Monaco built it out of the sea. Let's get into it. Number 8. LA Condamine. Let's start down at the water, because this is the one part of Monaco you've definitely seen, even if you've never set foot in the place. La Condamine wraps around the harbor of Port Hercule, which is where the super yachts go. If you've ever watched footage of the Monaco Grand Prix and seen that forest of gleaming white boats packed in behind the barriers, you were looking at La Condamine. And here's the thing most people don't realize, a lot of those yachts aren't visiting, they're home. For a certain kind of billionaire, the boat parked in that harbor is the actual residence, and the apartment on shore is basically a place to keep the extra shoes. But what makes this district genuinely interesting is that it's the closest thing Monaco has to a real neighborhood. There's an open-air market. There are actual local brasseries where the coffee doesn't cost 12 euros. Regular Monegasque people live here, alongside the money, which in a country this rarefied is almost shocking. The average price to buy still sits around 54,000 euros per square meter. So let's not pretend it's affordable, but by Monaco standards, La Condamine is where you rub shoulders with the wealthy rather than hiding from everyone in a tower. And during Grand Prix week, this is the beating heart of the whole spectacle. Apartments with a balcony overlooking the circuit rent out for absolutely staggering sums for those few days, because the race literally runs through the streets below, and people will pay a fortune to sip champagne while Formula One cars scream past their living room window. So, La Condamine is where Monaco keeps its harbor and its last bit of normal life. Climb the hill straight up behind it, though, and the normal disappears fast, because you arrive at the single most concentrated square of luxury on the entire planet. Number 7. The Carré d'Or. They call it the Golden Square, and it sits in the small stretch of streets wrapped around the Monte Carlo casino. This is the Monaco of your imagination. The casino, the Hôtel de Paris, the Bentleys idling out front, the boutiques where nothing has a price tag because if you're asking, you already can't. Here's how tight the real estate is inside this square. Apartments regularly change hands between 50 and 100,000 euros per square meter, and the penthouses can push past that. To translate, a fairly ordinary 2-bedroom apartment, the kind of place that would be unremarkable almost anywhere else, comfortably costs more than 10 million euros. And that's before you get into the trophy addresses like 1 Monte Carlo or 26 Carré d'Or, where the numbers stop meaning anything at all. But the detail I love the most about the Carré d'Or is what you don't see. From the street, you're looking at these beautiful Belle Époque facades, all wrought iron balconies and 19th century grandeur, and you'd assume it's mostly for show. It isn't. Behind those preserved fronts are some of the most expensive private residences on Earth, completely invisible to the tourist standing 10 feet away eating an ice cream. The facade is a mask, and the whole point is that you never see what's behind it. And this is where wealth comes to be at the center of everything. Everything is walkable. The best restaurants on the coast, 5 of them Michelin-starred, the opera, the casino, the shops, all a 2-minute stroll from your front door. This is for the resident who wants to be in the thick of it, who treats the Monaco social calendar, the Grand Prix, the yacht show, the galas, as the entire reason for being there. The Carré d'Or wants to be seen. Climb into the northeast corner of the country, though, and you'll find the people who paid a fortune to look down on all of it from the highest homes Monaco has. Number 6. LA Rousse / Saint-Romain. Up in the northeast corner of Monaco, right on the border where the principality bleeds into France, the building suddenly shoots straight up into the sky. This is La Rousse, which most people call Saint-Romain, and it is Monaco's answer to a very Monaco problem, which is that when you have no land, the only direction left to build is up. This is skyscraper territory, and it exists for a specific reason. The higher you go, the more sea you can see, and in Monaco, a view is not a luxury, it's the entire asset. An apartment halfway up a tower here, with an unobstructed sweep of the Mediterranean, is worth dramatically more than an identical apartment 3 floors down, staring at the building next door. People pay millions purely for altitude. Speaking of what people will pay just to see further than everyone else, there's a program someone on our team has been curious about called the Billionaire Brain Wave. It's a simple 7-minute audio built around theta brainwave research. The deep focus brain state linked to where big creative ideas come from. You put on headphones once a day, usually with your morning coffee, and that's the whole routine. It's a one-time $39. It comes with bonus guides on money habits and investing basics, and there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. So testing it costs you nothing if it's not for you. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to the top of those towers and exactly who lives up there. And here is the group that clusters up here, which genuinely delighted me when I dug into it. The Formula One drivers. This corner of Monaco sits right near the circuit, and a huge chunk of the current grid lives in these towers. Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, who's actually Monegasque and grew up here, and a whole rotating cast of their rivals. Think about how absurd that is for a second. These men live in apartments overlooking the exact streets they race through once a year. When the Grand Prix comes to town, they don't fly in and check into a hotel like everyone else on the grid. They roll out of bed, and the track is downstairs. It is, quite literally, the only home game in all of Formula One. Why do they cluster here? Partly the racetrack, partly the training facilities, partly the simple fact that when this many of your rivals live in the same square kilometer, you can all cycle and train and hang out together. But mostly it's the reason everyone comes to Monaco, and we need to talk about it plainly, because it's the engine under this entire video. Monaco charges its residents zero personal income tax. None. For a driver pulling in 50 or 100 million a year, living here instead of back home can save more money annually than most people earn in 100 lifetimes. The view is lovely. The tax rate is the actual reason. Saint-Romain rises up to chase the view, but the next district did the exact opposite and stretched out flat on a piece of Monaco that didn't even exist a lifetime ago. Number 5. Fontvieille. Everything about Fontvieille is different from the rest of Monaco, and there's a simple reason for that. It's newer. In fact, it's so new that the ground it sits on is artificial. Every square inch of this district was reclaimed from the Mediterranean Sea. Back in the 1960s, Monaco was already running out of room, and Prince Rainier III, the man who married Grace Kelly and who Monegasque still call the Builder Prince, looked at the sea south of the rock and decided he'd simply make more country. So they spent about 15 years dumping rock and fill into the water behind an enormous seawall, and out of the waves rose 33 hectares of brand new land, adding something like a fifth to Monaco's entire size. Let that sit for a moment. A reigning monarch looked at the ocean and said, "I'll have land there instead," and then he did it. And what they built on it feels almost suspiciously relaxed for Monaco. Wide streets, flat ground you can actually walk on without climbing a cliff, 4 hectares of parks and a rose garden planted in memory of Princess Grace, a proper marina, a football stadium, and crucially for the people who live here, actual space. This is where Monaco's wealthy families come when they want their children to have room to breathe, when the vertical intensity of Monte Carlo starts to feel like living inside a jewelry box. The prices tell the story of the trade-off. Fontvieille averages somewhere around 52 to 54,000 euros per square meter, which, incredibly, counts as relative value inside Monaco. You're paying less per square meter than the Carré d'Or, but you're getting bigger apartments, calm, and a village-like feel. Plenty of famous names have quietly based themselves here for exactly that reason. Drivers and stars who wanted the tax address without the constant noise. Oh, and the district also holds the heliport, which whisks residents to Nice Airport in about 7 minutes. Because when you live in Fontvieille, sitting in road traffic is simply not something that's going to happen to you. Fontvieille was Monaco's first great trick of building land out of water. Hold on to that idea, because it comes back at number 1 in a way that makes even this look modest. But first, we need to talk about the single strangest building in the entire country. Number 4. The Tour. Odéon, La Rousse. I know we've already been to La Rousse, but one building up here deserves its own spot on this list, because there is genuinely nothing else like it on Earth. The Tour Odéon. At 170 meters, it's the tallest building in Monaco, a glass and concrete giant that dominates the skyline. and it was the first high-rise the principality had allowed to be built in decades. And sitting on top of it, occupying the top 5 floors, is the Sky Penthouse. This thing has been valued at somewhere in the region of 350 to 400 million euros, which for years made it, by many counts, the most expensive apartment on the planet. It's around 35,000 square feet. It has a private rooftop infinity pool with a water slide that drops from the dance floor down into the water. There's a kitchen on every single floor. It comes with a chauffeur, a private caterer, and a concierge who never sleeps. It is a level of wealth that stops being relatable and just becomes a kind of art installation. But here is the detail that makes the Tour Odéon the perfect symbol of the whole country, and I want you to really picture this. That same tower, the one crowned by a 400 million euro penthouse, also contains 157 apartments of subsidized social housing for ordinary Monegasque citizens in the same building. And the two groups do not share a door. The billionaires and the social housing tenants enter through completely separate entrances, ride separate lifts, and essentially never cross paths. Think about what that says. In a country this small, on land this scarce, they physically stacked the richest home in the world directly on top of rent-controlled flats, and then engineered the building so that the two worlds would never actually meet. That's not an accident. That's Monaco in a single tower. The wealth and the everyday life are inches apart, and an invisible wall runs right between them. That tower hides its two worlds behind separate doors. The next district doesn't hide anything because it's where Monaco goes to lie on the beach, and it just happens to also be the most expensive strip of sand in Europe. Number 3. Larvotto. Larvotto is the one district where Monaco actually touches a beach, and for a country obsessed with the sea, that makes this sand absurdly valuable. For most of the year, this is the Principality's playground. The beach itself was recently given a complete makeover, and now it's lined with chic restaurants and beach clubs and bars where a lounger for the afternoon costs more than a decent hotel room. Running along the back of it is Avenue Princess Grace, and you need to know about this street because it is routinely described as one of the most expensive residential addresses anywhere in the world. We're talking prices that have pushed toward 190,000 euros per square meter on that avenue. Per square meter. A modest balcony on that road costs more than a mansion almost anywhere else on the planet. This is also Monaco's entertainment and culture district. The Grimaldi Forum, the giant convention and arts center, pulls in something like 250,000 visitors a year for its exhibitions and events. So Larvotto has this dual personality. By day, it's beach clubs and sunshine, and people who've clearly never had a real job sipping rosé. By evening, it's galas and openings and the kind of crowd where the person next to you at the bar might casually own a shipping fleet. And the billionaires who live along this seafront aren't the flashy look-at-me types. These are people like the property and shipping magnate Eel Ofer, worth around $19 billion, or the Belgian sugar Eric Wittek, worth about $8 billion. Names that mean nothing to most people, attached to fortunes that could buy entire towns, quietly holding apartments with a view of that beach. Because in Monaco, the truly serious money doesn't shout. It just buys the best view and closes the curtains. Larvotto had always been the crown jewel of the Monaco seafront. Had being the key word because in December of 2024, something appeared right next door that instantly made even Avenue Princess Grace look like a bargain, and it did it by rising straight out of the water. Number 2. Monaco-Ville, the Rock. Now this one breaks the pattern completely, and that's exactly why it belongs so high on the list. Everywhere else on this list, status is measured in euros per square meter. Monaco-Ville doesn't play that game at all because Monaco-Ville is the Rock, the ancient fortress outcrop jutting out into the sea, and it's where the story of the entire country began. The Grimaldi family has physically lived up here, in the Prince's Palace, since 1297. Read that year again. They have held this rock for over 700 years, through wars and revolutions and the rise and fall of basically every other royal house in Europe. So here's the fascinating twist. This is the one address in all of Monaco that essentially no amount of money can buy you into. The Rock is the oldest and smallest district, home to only about 3% of the population, and it's a preserved medieval town of narrow lanes and low stone buildings that look almost exactly as they did centuries ago. There are no glass towers here, No penthouses with water slides. It's the palace, the cathedral where Grace Kelly is buried, the government buildings, the courts, and a tiny number of homes that almost never change hands. And that's the point. Every billionaire on this list is, in the end, a tenant of this family. The Verstappens and the Ofers and the penthouse buyers, all of them live in a country ruled from this rock, under a prince whose ancestors were sitting up here 400 years before the United States existed. You can buy the most expensive apartment on earth in the shadow of this fortress, and you will still, always, be living in the House of Grimaldi's country. So the real hierarchy of Monaco isn't actually about square meters at all. At the very top sits a single family that has never once had to buy their way in. Everyone else is just paying extraordinary sums for the privilege of living near them. And the newest, most expensive way to do that rose out of the sea barely more than a year ago. Number 1. Mareterra. In December of 2024, Monaco did something no other country on earth is doing at this scale. It finished building a brand new district on top of the Mediterranean Sea, and it instantly became the most expensive real estate in the world. It's called Mareterra, which fuses the Latin words for sea and land, and the backstory is pure Monaco. The principality is the second smallest country on the planet. It could fit inside half of Central Park. It has no income tax, so everyone with serious money wants in, but there is physically no room left. So Monaco did the only thing it could. It went back to Prince Rainier's old trick from Fontvieille, except this time it spent around 2 billion euros to pull 6 new hectares of land straight out of the ocean, expanding the entire country by 3% in a single project. And they didn't just dump some apartment blocks on it. They hired a roster of the most celebrated architects alive, Renzo Piano, Norman Foster, Tadao Ando, and built a genuine eco-district with nearly 1,000 trees shipped in from Tuscany, a marina, a public promenade, and just 110 apartments plus a handful of villas and townhouses. Deliberately tiny supply on land that didn't exist 3 years ago. Now here are the numbers, and I need you to brace yourself because they are genuinely difficult to process. Prices at Mareterra run between 100,000 and 130,000 euros per square meter, making it, square foot for square foot, more expensive than Billionaires Row in Manhattan or the Peak in Hong Kong. In the year it opened, 7 separate apartments sold for more than 100 million euros each. The average new build sale in Monaco that year hit 36 million euros, roughly 6 times the price of a normal resale, and that spike was driven almost entirely by this one district. And it was largely sold before it was even finished. But here's the part that ties this whole video together. 9 Monegasque families reportedly put up the money to build it. The land alone cost around 1 billion euros, construction another billion, and every last unit found a buyer at prices no other place on earth can command. Monaco looked at the sea, saw not water but future real estate, and manufactured brand new billionaire land out of the waves because the demand to live in this 2-square-kilometer tax haven is so ferocious that the country literally could not build fast enough to hold it. That's the real secret of where Monaco's billionaires live. When they run out of the most expensive land in the world, they don't move somewhere cheaper. They just build more of the most expensive land in the world right on top of the sea. And that's the real map of Monaco. 8 districts stacked into a country smaller than most airports, where the difference between one street and the next can be tens of millions of euros. Because here's the thread running through all of it. Everywhere else, billionaires spread out and hide behind distance and gates. In Monaco, there's no room to hide, so instead they stack straight up into the sky. They wall the rich and the ordinary into separate entrances of the same tower. And when they finally run out of land, they build brand new land out of the ocean. It's the most concentrated wealth on the planet, crammed onto a rock the House of Grimaldi has ruled for 700 years. So which one got you? The tower where the world's priciest penthouse sits on top of social housing, the racetrack where half the F1 grid lives, or the entire neighborhood Monaco pulled out of the sea? Drop it in the comments, hit that like button if any of this surprised you, and subscribe to Global Status, because we break down the world's hidden wealth every single week.